This is a
So
great
everybody
turnout.
knows, since we have a quorum of the Wellfleet Energy Committee, we have to follow the open meeting law. So if anybody else wants to record, please let me know. This is being recorded. Any votes we take has to be by roll call. You don't have a quorum, Kevin.
No,
I don't. How about Truro? Is there a quorum of your meeting?
Nope.
no, neither committee.
Okay. So then it's just officially our meeting.
So just to be clear, who is here from what, from, not from Wellfleet, and where are they from?
Michael Holt, Churro.
And I'm from Orleans.
What's your first name?
Kevin.
Hey.
Bob Higginsteel, Truro.
Okay.
So are we actually meeting with the Truro Energy Committee and the Orleans Energy Committee?
Looks like we don't have a quorum of either of those two committees.
Yeah, I might text Brian. We had our energy committee meeting earlier today, and I'll just text them. I don't know.
Okay. It was supposed to be, if we could get
Right.
a quorum of each committee, that would have been better, but
Is
Right.
that actually on the agenda
yes.
to meet with Truro and Orleans?
Let me see
I
what.
thought
the agenda
I
says.
thought we were hoping to get as many Outer Cape as possible. What about Eastham and Provincetown?
Eastham has no energy committee, and we haven't approached Provincetown yet.
Okay.
The idea is, of course, to make it the full Outer Cape. We're just, we're getting ourselves started.
So, so help me to understand this, because on our agenda, which was advertised, it says meeting with Orleans, even though, of course, the Wellfleet Energy Committee never actually even discussed it or agreed to do this. But, you know, just so that I'm clear about it, you know, taking notes as a secretary, did Truro notice it that way? And did Orleans notice it that way?
I'll check. I can check. As soon as you said that, I don't think we did. So I don't know. I'll look. I just texted Brian.
But at this point, we only have a
Orleans?
quorum of the Wellfleet Energy Committee. So
Right.
at this point, we only have an official meeting of the Wellfleet Energy Committee. Everyone else is therefore just a participant in a public meeting from the point of view of who's officially here.
And I'm just curious, did Orleans notice it, Kevin?
Did the members of our Renewable Energy Committee
We
got this notice,
a
and a
note.
couple of them responded to me.
No, but we got a note from
You didn't
the
notice
town
it
clerk in
as
Orleans.
a meeting of your energy committee, or did you? Did you notice it as a meeting of your energy committee?
It was, we got a letter, an email from the town clerk in Orleans saying the meeting needed to be posted. Presumably she took care of it.
And was it with Truro and Wellfleet and the Outer Cape? I'm just trying to get this.
No, Truro did not post it as an official meeting.
And Orleans did not post it as a meeting with Truro and Wellfleet. Just posted it with
Orleans posted it as a meeting with Wellfleet.
Okay, I just want to get that straight. Thank you.
All right. Okay, and why don't the Wellfleet people introduce themselves, or I'll call everyone. This Jeff Tash is our Finance Committee representative. David Mead Fox is an Energy Committee member. Robert Shapiro is an Energy Committee member. Suzanne Ryan is a member of our committee. Lillian Green is our secretary. Carol Maganow is an Energy Committee member. And GB Brigham is an Energy Committee member. We also have Kevin Clements, who's the chair of the Orleans Committee. Michael Holtz, our
Truro Climate Action Committee.
Climate Action, okay. Bob Higgins-Steele is on both Energy and climate action in Truro. Did I miss somebody? No. Okay. So what we're here to talk about is potential joint actions related to greenhouse gas reductions. And David Mead Fox has prepared some talking points. And as Lily pointed out, the committee has not, our committee has not discussed this separately. This is a working session where everything's on the table, and these talking points are just to get us talking. They're not an official position of our committee yet, and hopefully we will eventually arrive at some plan of action. I see Michael Holt just joined us, but you're muted. Michael is from Truro.
Yeah, he was,
Michael's on the Energy Committee?
Climate action.
Climate Action. Okay.
yeah, he was here before. He just logged in, I think, with a different device.
Okay. So again, our plan is to look at what we might do collectively in terms of a plan for reducing greenhouse gases on the outer Cape, if Orleans counts as the outer Cape. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
We feel outer, yeah.
Okay. We might go as far as Brewster, I suppose. Hi, Bob. What?
So we'll be participating just as members of the public. Will we be able to comment? I don't know what the protocol is.
Well, our Energy Committee, when someone shows up at our meeting, we invite them to sit at the table and talk. So
Okay.
that's our protocol.
Okay.
So we'll follow that protocol. There's no distinction as to what committee you're on. This is collectively a group discussion. Hi, Mike. Michael, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to really thank you and everyone who's behind this initiative, because I think it's great to do what we can regionally, and not only because we're going to come up with some ideas that won't really work individually, but they will work collectively. And also, it's just great to have to feel the support of other people that are working on the same issues and not feel so alone. So thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. You're certainly welcome, and thank you for joining us. David, do you want to take over? And do you want to share your screen?
Yes, I do. I will try that now.
Make sure.
I have to give the system the ability to grant access, I think. Let's see.
Who's the meeting host?
Technically me. Oh, in terms of the software, me.
Okay, so do you know how to give him access to screen
I
sharing?
just checked that participants have access. He
Okay,
needs to give himself access to his own computer's screen.
Yeah, I'm working on that now. It says Zoom will not be able to record the contents of your screen until it is quit.
Okay. You
I'll
don't
do
have
it
to
later.
record it.
Yeah, I don't care about that. That's just what the message was.
Okay.
Can you make my screen appear somehow? I just tried share screen, and that's what I got for a message.
No, I can't make your screen appear.
Oh, wait. I think
Are
I
you-
see something happening. Here we go. Wait a minute. How's that?
Hey,
That's better.
Okay.
Make
Uh,
if you're going to do a PowerPoint, so make it full screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So this is kind of covers a lot of ground. I apologize in advance. And there's some pieces of this that I will not spend a lot of time on because there's just so much to deal with. But I wanted to do a little context for starters. So this is, and you got what you're going to see in this is very close to what Dick sent around earlier today with a few changes, which we'll get to, but nothing gigantic. But the idea is to just start a conversation among us and interested individuals, groups, town committees, and others. And the idea is eventually to come up with a plan, to come up with a team, and to initiate some action. We all know how important this is. I won't dwell on that. And I think kind of like the pandemic we're in now, this is an enormous challenge, and it can feel completely overwhelming. But what I would submit is that precisely because of that, we need to get started. We're not going to have all the answers. We don't have all the resources, but we have to begin precisely because of the importance of this issue and how hard it's going to actually be. So this presentation has kind of what I guess reporters are supposed to do: what, why, where, when, how, who, and next steps. So net zero, pretty much, this is the simple version that I could come up with. It means making major energy efficiency improvements, decarbonizing through essentially electrifying everything that needs power, and getting the electricity from renewable sources.
So David,
Yeah.
are you wanting comments and conversation as you go, or you want to do it after you've gone through the whole document?
Well, I guess we could try as we go. I mean, what I've found in the past with presentations is sometimes a comment will be made and it's something that I'm going to get to in the next slide or whatever. But go ahead, let's give it a shot.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've read one of the versions of this already.
Yeah.
And my main comment, I think, refers right to this first definition, which is that my understanding of net zero is that our entire carbon footprint goes down to zero.
Correct.
And so it actually includes a number of categories other than just energy and electrification. So there's also, and I think that we need to work on the other categories as well. So for example, things like well, the biggest category that you haven't yet listed is the consumption of goods and services. So when people buy things and use things and throw them out, all that has a big carbon footprint.
Yeah.
That doesn't usually fall into exactly the energy category. So there's that category, and then there's the waste disposal category. How we deal with our waste can have a high or a low carbon footprint. And then there's the investment. Yes, agriculture, any agricultural practices that we do here on the Cape, and food is related. You could put that in either the agriculture category, or you can put it in the consumption of goods and services category. So, and then the thing I was just talking about is investment, where we invest our money, and whether our pensions and our town investments are decarbonized or not. And there's a few other that maybe aren't coming to me right off my head. I do have what I think is a complete list, which I can pull up at some point. But I just wanted to make the general point that some of these other categories are pretty large in terms of the total carbon footprint. And I love the fact that you said a little bit later in the document, we need to get to work before we even know what the exact carbon inventory is. We can do those two things at the same time, but we need to start reducing now. Right. So I think I really agree with that. And I just wanted to say finally that some of these other categories, different people have different passions, and people, we need to try to harness the different passions that we have in a group and in a community. So if some people are more passionate about waste than they are about energy, or about food and consumption and all those different things, we need to include all of that.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said. I agree 100%. What it's going to come down to, of course, to put it really simply, is bandwidth. You know, what we decide as a group of people, we can actually take on. But there's no question that those are all parts of the net zero equation. I was afraid, honestly, if I included all those things and the whole list, this would be even longer, but maybe that was a mistake. But I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I think we need to, even if we're not, our first projects are only going to be about energy because that's all we have the bandwidth for, which is fine. I think we still need to, when we're defining net zero to the community, we need to put all these other things on people's radars so that they're thinking about them.
Yep, absolutely. And if you'd like and you want to send your version of all that around, or I certainly would like to see it, but you can send it around at some point after the meeting.
Sure, we'll do.
Okay.
Or share it at the end, or later on put it up. But okay, let's keep going because that's a good point. But
So
can I go back to this? I know as far as a definition of decarbonization, electrifying everything, and renewable sources, does it make sense to define them here or in a different place?
I was just trying to give a simple statement about it. There's a lot of detail to be defined for sure. And we can get into that, I think, as we go through this. We can do it right now if you want.
Well, I think you do define that stuff a little later in the document, don't you?
Yeah.
So I have a comment of a different nature. This comes about because we picked the date 2050 as a kind of magic date here. Now, it's not that I am against that. I'm not against that. It's certainly better than we've had it at all for years in terms of the general view. But the fact of the matter is what we're really talking about is the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And net zero takes us to a point where everything until then, we're adding to the molecules of carbon dioxide.
Right.
So it's very tricky to think that even if we zero, that we will have achieved, what we need to achieve. I think at this stage, it's a good, it's a good solid point to talk about. But understanding that, in fact, the way we get to net zero by 2050 has an effect on the whole situation if what we're talking about is the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and whether we're going to stay below 1.5 degrees or 2. Ultimately, what you really need to look at is how do we prevent getting too many molecules up there? And all of the UN reports that have dealt with this issue have scenarios 50 because they overshoot. That is, what you've done before you get to the net zero is adding and adding and adding. And when you get to net zero at 2050, you may have too much in there. And that's not a hopeless problem because there's another issue which we aren't going to address, which has to do with figuring out how to extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is a requirement of the plan, but it's not something that we're going to be working on.
decarbonization.
Right.
Removing carbon dioxide. Yes, I know, Bob. And there's also water vapor as a greenhouse gas, which is important. And there are things being done, but
Was
okay,
your essential
let's
point, Bob, that we
on.
should set a,
Let's move on because we know there are more, we can do more, but let's see what this is. David,
I mentioned that because there was in the document a proposal for a 3-step approach to getting it with 3 years. I just think that there's, I don't know whether that's a good idea.
okay, well,
put that in there.
Well, let's go on. Let's find out. We'll talk.
We can talk about that, certainly, Robert, when we get to that. I'm happy to do that. This is just, these are ideas only, everybody. This is not a proposal. These are just ideas that are out there.
Good ideas.
So this, most of you know about the United Nations, the Paris Agreement in 2015 kind of triggered this whole thing. Then there was a study done in 2018 by the UN that came up with the bulk of this recommendation to get to net zero by 2050. I'm going to get to some federal stuff, which wasn't in the original proposal in a minute, but obviously the present federal administration is unwilling to lead in any way. And so that leaves states, business communities, and individuals to do what they can. Massachusetts got this going, I think, mainly in 2008. And it looks like the early goal might be achieved. There's a legislation that's working its way through the State House. The governor has already announced a goal of net zero by 2050. This is in globally and in many ways, not in every state or every country, but in many ways, this idea is not anymore, I would say, crazy or wild-eyed. It's becoming more and more mainstream. Getting there is difficult. What to include can be contentious, but the basic idea of trying to get there, and it does go beyond, kind of to your point, Robert, net zero, it goes to net negative, which is a whole other thing off into the future that matters a lot.
So let's get to net zero first.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. That's why I only mentioned that in one place in this entire presentation. So on to where it should take place, of course, everywhere. But we can't be everywhere and do everywhere. What we can do is try to do something locally on the Outer Cape. I just want to remind everybody, if you haven't seen this, that we're not alone in doing this just on the Outer Cape. It's the entire Cape. Every town except Bourne has placed the same climate emergency resolution on their upcoming town meeting warrants. Every town's doing something differently. A number of towns are banding together, kind of like we are on the Outer Cape. But the point is, this is, again, a very much a shared Cape-wide endeavor. How people do it is going to be debated and will vary. The easy answer is now. We have to start. We don't have the luxury of waiting. We don't have all the answers. We don't have all the resources. But because of that, and my proposal is we got to get going and do what we can. And by the way, I think a great deal of this, which we'll get to, is about bringing the entire community into the process, bringing people in beyond the group of hardcore people. We need to have massive, I hope it was kind of evident in the stuff later, lots of community meetings, lots of discussion, arguments, fights, whatever it takes to kind of have this be a community-owned issue and set of activities. So this is what I added more recently. You may have seen this. It's kind of odd to even see the words, the three words, federal level leadership in one phrase in today's world. But leaving that aside, this is potential. So you may have seen that the House Select Committee on the Climate Crisis released their climate action plan at the end of last month. And there's a link there if you want to read the whole report, which is about 500 pages, I think. I understand there's lots of problems with it. I'm just saying that this is a beginning, and it won't go anywhere right now. But I think it's worth noting that there is some potential for federal leadership, because if we think of this like the World War II mobilization metaphor, then there's an important place for the federal government. So the plan has these 3 bullet points: net zero, ambitious interim targets, and then get to net negative emissions in the second half of the century. There, as I said, there's a ton of stuff in the plan. And I'm not going to go even through this, but I just put in a couple of the sections. One is on building a cleaner and more resilient electricity sector. You can see there's a whole series of incentives, tax credits, environmental justice focus around this sector. And by the way, I'll send this new version of this out to everybody afterwards. Transportation, again, I just took this right out of the plan. There's a whole bunch of stuff that can be worked on to make transportation cleaner and more resilient.
This
And
is
then
the
lastly,
federal plan, David?
this is the House of Representatives plan
Okay.
by the House Climate Action Committee. And this is it was just released on June 30th. And then lastly, I just thought I'd put this one in about building and upgrading homes and businesses. This one actually includes some of the issues that we can get into maybe more easily than some others. But again, just to say, if we get lucky, in my view, we will actually have some federal leadership, and maybe if we get luckier, still serious federal dollars going into this effort. So that's kind of global, federal, state, and a little bit about local. So what can we do right here? I kind of boiled it down just conceptually to these three things. And then these are 5 goals that we could have 20 goals. We could have 2 goals. We could have these goals. We could have other goals, but this is just a start for our discussion. As you can see, one is making existing buildings more energy efficient, getting on board when it becomes available with net zero new construction. People can do this voluntarily, and we hope that the regional high school project will see the wisdom of that. But in terms of requiring it, we can't require it in Wellfleet just because we want to, or anywhere in the Outer Cape. There has to be enabling state building codes that are essentially net zero stretch codes to allow it to be mandated with new construction. Transportation, the transportation and is, the way I see it right now is we can't do a whole lot other than this, although this is a lot, to help people understand what that means and help people understand where the electric powered transportation world is, what's available now, what's going to be available next year. And then maybe if we get lucky, develop some beneficial promotions and financing working with electric vehicle vendors and financial institutions.
David, I really do want to make sure that we do talk about the high school. Can we talk about it now or
Sure,
at
yeah.
the end of the presentation?
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Okay, because we've had a number of discussions about the high school and we did bring this up to the Board of Selectmen or Select Board. And they agree that we should try, that it would be fine for us to go out and meet with other energy committees and the school committee, the superintendent of schools, what have you, to the design committee, to talk about the building proposal as is and to see if we can move it or we could work with people so that it actually is redesigned and it is net zero, and to see if there's any funds out there that are available now that weren't before, since the governor has this goal of 2050 being net zero. So I think it would be really helpful to get feedback and to really talk about a plan about moving forward on this, because we don't have a lot of time to do that. And I think that would be very valuable.
Right, agreed, agreed.
So can I say something about that?
Yeah.
There's a regional school building committee, and I got on their agenda a few days after the select board meeting and asked them, explained to them why we were concerned about the school not being net zero and the fact that we felt it would be in need of a major revision within 10 or 15 years if they're going to meet what we anticipate will be state mandated goals of 75%, of 50% by 2030, 75% reduction by 2040. And somewhere in there, that building will have to be net zero because it's easier to do than anything else. So this morning, I got a letter back from them, which said, thank you for your comments. We've been working hard. We had a lot of people and it's cost too much money. And that's it. We're not going to do anything.
Really? Wow.
I got that back. I just got the email today.
Well, there was one benefit of this, the whole process, as I understand it, in most places is delayed until the spring. That
Right. So I guess we have three options, and I can write to them and say we have three options. When we left the meeting, I was under the impression that they were going to look at a path to get to net zero. Even if it wasn't done immediately, they would look at a retrofit path. They said their big energy usage is heating, which will be which is natural gas, and cooking, which is also natural gas. And while they could probably easily switch to electric power for cooking, because they haven't bought the stoves yet, they can put any stove they want in. Whether or not they use ground source heat pumps, which would be appropriate for a building of that scale, or even air source heat pumps, but probably ground source, they felt that they couldn't get there. Their focus was, when they look at the cost, what they evaluated was more insulation. They didn't evaluate changing the way you heat the building. And they didn't go back and look at it again the way I thought they promised they would. So now, one thing going to do is say, well, we have three options, and write to them and say, we have three options. We can forget about it, which is not likely. We could ask you to really evaluate the alternatives instead of just telling us what you did, or we could flat out oppose the new building because it's not net zero, delay the project for a few years and come back with a net zero project. We had hoped you would take the middle course of evaluating alternatives, but if you're going to just say this letter is your final answer, then our final answer may be we're going to get up at town meeting and oppose the project. That's an approach. I don't want we ought to talk about that.
May I interject? Are you done with the?
Yeah. No, yeah. Just a suggestion. I'm not.
Yeah. No. I'm not sure if this applies to a school, but I don't know where to start. The Mass Save Cape Light through a contractor has it's $5,000. I don't know if that would cover it for the school, but I can talk to them. I was on with both Cape Light Compact, one of their vendors, and someone from DOER today. So I haven't digested it all, but there's a design package incentive that's $5,000 feasibility study. And if whoever's in charge, the building committee decides that, yeah, they're serious about the feasibility study, there's another $20,000 grant to develop it and do modeling. I attended and have listened to it several times since, a DOER webinar on Passive House. And there's so many misconceptions about cost and this, that, and the other. But, and I can send around to you guys two things. There's a 90-second video, you know, passive house in 90 seconds. And then there's the state webinar. Now, on the state webinar, it's I won't get into it, but basically, when you improve the envelope enough, and schools are great for this because somebody asked this very question about, you know, how is it for something like a school? Because and stop me if I'm getting too nerdy, but
No, this is great.
the ratio of the volume to the surface area, you know, a big building is better. We're trying to do that in Truro with an affordable house. This is another conversation for another day, but you guys are going into some affordable housing. I think you have an RFP or an RFQ out now. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. And we actually have given them some good information. The group that's working on that here in town that would help, that I believe they have put in their RFP the issue of net zero. I don't know if they did it as a requirement or not, but it certainly is on their radar screen.
Yeah, well, they should contact early on, contact Cape Light for the feasibility. You know, what we're trying to do, I know we're off to school, is get this feasibility study, the first part of it, as a requirement from our ZBA to the developer. We're going to be presenting that in the next couple of weeks. We could
Can we
not
get this
meet-
back onto the school? Because I think that was really the issue.
Okay,
Let me
well-
share something so you know what you're talking about here. I am looking at it from a February Nauset Regional High School draft budget for the building. And so you know what you guys are talking about. The HVAC is scoped out at just under 12 million. And I know that the select board, you know, what you guys were talking about was what would be the delta. And I think if you can't address that, you're not going to get traction on this issue. So if you can get somebody who can look at this kind of the size and scope of what we're dealing with in terms of the regional high school, and then what you're proposing, whether or not it makes sense for, you know, you guys have to make a decision how much you want to, you know, go to the mattresses for this particular issue and whether or not you're going to gain support of the taxpayers. But just so you know the scope of what you're dealing with.
Right. Well, I would say talk to Cape Light, see what money is available for a feasibility study and modeling for the high school.
But the point is, there's a regional school building committee that has to go do that. We can't do that. And I thought they were going to seriously look at alternatives after the last meeting. But instead, they just said, no, we did our work 2 years ago. We're not going to do anymore. So that's where we are.
Dick, I would support the proposal you made about this. I think that doing nothing is not an option in my mind. Giving them an opportunity one more time to take the middle road of seriously redoing their design is, I suppose, worth doing. But I have a feeling it's going to take a more stronger action than that to try to get all the relevant towns to object to the way it's designed now, one way or another.
Well, I mean, even just getting the relevant towns and the right people to maybe sign a letter saying, you know, we do want you to take a look at this. We really want you to reevaluate this.
Or I thought that we said, if you can't redesign it now, come up with a path to get to net zero within a few years and look at what those costs will be, because then maybe that will lead you to redesign it now.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that makes sense.
that makes sense, Dick, but I think it makes too much sense. I don't think it, I think it's too, I think that path is going to take too long. I think, we're talking about a matter of several months. So I'd like
Or
to be
2
more
years,
direct.
because they may have to go back to the drawing board if it doesn't pass.
Yeah, I mean, I
It would be
think,
so much better if we didn't go down that path. I mean, if they came to that conclusion on their own, that would be
As
so
I
much.
always said, there's always enough time to do it over, even though there's never enough time to do it right the
Right.
first.
Well, do you guys got to ask them what kind of a HVAC system is in the proposal? Are these radiators or is this
Natural gas.
natural gas is for producing the heat? What is it that they're heating? Are they heating radiators or is it entirely an air-powered system? I think that's a really important question, isn't it? Because if
Yeah,
it's,
but they do air conditioning too, so I think it's got to be air.
if it is an air system throughout, then there may be a path where they could go from what they're proposing to something. If it's a radiator system, I don't know how you get there.
Right.
it seems to me that the idea of getting letters from all the towns is an opportunity to both, light a fire under them and let them know that there's a lot of people who feel this way. But at the same time, in the letter, we can start doing some of the arguing, and we can start giving them some of the numbers of how I mean, we've stated in broad terms that it is going to be cheaper in the long run, and that it's important. But we can add a little bit of meat to those arguments, and try to make those arguments stronger in the next communication, so that we actually start talking about some of this stuff, some of the financing options that there are that Bob was talking about, and we start. I just, yeah, that's my idea.
The engineer at DOER's answer to the question about a school was, what would be the payback period for any additional cost? I'm going to not bring to the table what he said about the additional cost, because he said it could be negligible, but I'm going to leave that out. He said that the payback would be along the lines of 15 years. 10 to 15 years, it may improve. But that's been their experience. And
Yeah, so what I'm saying is that we need to put some numbers like that in the next communication to these people and let it come from every town.
yeah, I had spoken months ago. I had called the superintendent's office and was put in touch with, I don't know the man's first name, but his last name is Levasseur.
Mhm.
And he's the chair of the committee, and he didn't,
Greg.
the path, it's, I think they need to be steered just to have an option, because they chose a lead. I'm not getting into the weeds. There needs to be, for a building of this size, this cost, and this long, there needs to be some serious planning. No matter what has gone on, there's there's one chance to get this right. I mean, if you can pay something off in 15 years with existing, the way it is existing, and I think, and that there are so many misconceptions, so many, let me back up a minute. I was in, I'm a carpenter cabinet maker by trade. I had a remodeling contracting business, and after I got sick of cabinet making for probably 25 years, worked in mostly green communities to the stretch code. So there's so many people out there. This is the way I did it. This is the way I do it. This is the way I'm gonna do it. And to me, that doesn't cut it now. And I'm not in your town, but we all have a stake in this. I mean, Truro pays, for our students. I would like to see you guys have a school paid off in 15 years. And maybe at that point, your taxes, whatever your property taxes, the assessment was, starts to go down.
When you say pay off in 15 years, do you mean that the extra cost of doing the energy
Yes.
correctly will pay,
Yes.
that part will pay back for
Yes,
itself in
and
15 years? Yeah.
Then you're basically,
You're saving money after that.
you're saving money, and you're going to have reduced maintenance costs. This is not new stuff. It's just new. The education.
Why can't the committee be tossing this back to the state? If the state is the one telling us that we've got to be to net zero, then why? I mean, we have one part of the state that is paying for this school, and you would think that all the schools that are being built under the auspices of the state would want to conform with the plans of the state. So rather than going to the individual towns and doing this, maybe you guys got to leapfrog and figure out who in the state to make this so that the money can be identified, targeted, and made available.
I've contacted the MSBA, that's the Massachusetts School Building Authority, and our state senator and state rep, that to say stop all new school buildings until there's either a new code or a new way of doing things. You can go to the MSBA website and see what the incentives for funding are, and it really needs to change. Now, change at the state level is glacial. It's needed, and it's needed. Our rep and senator are on board to a point. So yeah, Jeff, I will continue to do that and educate people and advocate to the state. And I think we could all do that,
I'm just reacting what the committee is trying to do here. And I think you guys have got to identify what it is that is the most critical things you're trying to achieve immediately, and then what you're trying to do with this plan. You don't have to be there today, but that's what you got to figure out, is that strategy for the committee and what you guys are trying to achieve.
Yeah, can I ask you, Bob, you said that you talked with Julian and Sarah, and they're on board to a point. What does that mean?
Well, what they did is, one thing they did, and they've introduced the bill. I don't exactly know. I do know. Let me just put it again. Action on the state level is glacial. Julian is very involved in net zero by 2020. Sarah's a big supporter.
Net zero by 2020?
I mean, I'm sorry. I wish, but 2050. They did introduce a bill requiring the new school, and they just introduced it maybe a couple of weeks ago. And I can forward it to you all. Whatever you want, I'll forward you.
Yeah, definitely.
To asking the regional school to be that they have to purchase renewable energy or have solar. You know, that's nibbling around the edges. It's great. And I'll be in touch with them, and we can all be in touch with them. Just that I asked them, they can stop, they can introduce the bill. This is where it's to a point. They can introduce a bill on an emergency basis, just as the governor can do an executive order on an emergency basis and say, we're going to stop building schools and designing schools. Anything that's in the pipeline now gets stopped and redesigned. But I wasn't expecting that to go anywhere, and it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. But I think, to Jeff's point, there's a point. And I think also if I think it would not be a bad thing to just vis-a-vis the high school is, to really do to get the press involved, WCAI, the Cape, I don't know what their NPR or something. I mean, and the Independent, the Banner, whoever. If we want to, I mean, one thing besides the committee doing it, if we want to take things to the state level, then there has to be, education, and that means publicity and everything. If we're really serious, it's like whatever it takes. And I'm done.
I have a question for you, Bob. So I thought you said to a point, as one word, but a one-word point, another word. So, I understand that they've introduced bills, but you realize that the session's over at the end of this month. So the bills that they introduced, I don't know
Can't
what
be reintroduced until January.
the session, the 2-year session is over right this
Right.
year in July. At the end
Yeah,
of
they have to
July.
have a new bill. They have to
Yeah,
reintroduce.
after
They have
that,
to have a
in the
new
fall.
bill on.
Right, okay,
January.
okay, gotcha. But I do think there's a point here about reaching out to them in their offices and seeing if they could do some legwork to see if there's any state funding. I mean, if Baker is saying, net zero by 2050, there has to be something behind that, wouldn't you think, for like something like a new regional school, to get
Absolutely.
there. I mean, you would think that, and I would think that, Julian and Sarah's staff would be able to help us to do some of that homework to see if, what's out there and what's, how could this actually be advanced? And then we could come back and talk about, I think that could be answered fairly quickly. And then we could come back and talk about getting some kind of a letter together to go to the superintendent of school, the design committee, what have you, with the backing of the towns, to advance that to the school. I think that could be a good plan.
What's your what are your steps to this? Because I think if it
I think
comes
we might know enough about, in broad terms, the kind of funding that's available. We might know enough just amongst ourselves to put it in a letter.
Now, I was wondering if we would want to consider doing a couple things in parallel, because it seems like the state, two things. It seems like the state effort, we could get information that might inform the letter from the state, sure, but the state is a huge project. It takes a lot of time, long time frame, lobbying, all that stuff. But why not at the very same time put together a letter? And I'm thinking of like Bob, because you've been working on this so much, of sort of a draft letter that we could potentially have each committee, each energy committee, present to the select board of each town that's involved with the school, and have a conversation and try to get support from the select board of each town for this letter. Roughly, maybe it's the exact same letter from each town. And that's going to take some time just to do that little step and send it off to the building committee so that they get a very clear statement from every single town, ideally, that this is a problem that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
To me, that sounds like the way to go.
Yeah, I would be glad to call, the Julian and Sarah's office tomorrow and just get some feedback from them. If you want me to, do you want me to? I
Sure.
mean, usually it takes forever, to go through the state process, but they may be able to help in a short order. I'll also call the Cape Cod Commission and see if there's any funding that they're aware of, through grants or private grants or, state grants either. I'll do that tomorrow if you'd like. You want me to do that too?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So moving forward, how can we bring Eastham into this? If they don't have an energy committee or a climate action, but it sounds like there would be interested parties.
I'll call Jackie Beebe too. She's the town
I
administrator.
think they just formed the Climate Action Committee.
Did they?
Well,
Well,
I thought I heard that.
Do you want me to call Jackie as well? I'll call Jackie Beebe.
Fine, yes.
All those, okay.
I still think I would like to write to them and say I was hoping that they would consider how they would get to net zero, even if it isn't immediate, rather than just flat out reject it, because the letter was very disappointing. And the sense of the meeting is they would look at it seriously, as opposed to just reiterating their position. We know their position. We know they did a LEED silver building because that was the sweet spot in terms of reimbursement at the time. The problem is we feel it'll be a major redesign within 15 years and we'll have to pay for that. And then it won't look like it was a very bright idea.
Well, Dick, I mean, I would support that letter. I think the question, though, is who is it from? Do we want to wait, in a sense, and have the letter be from at least elements of the energy committees of all the towns?
No, I think it's both. It's both, because the energy committees of the towns will take a couple of weeks.
Right.
This was something that should happen immediately.
So do you want to do it from you, Dick?
Yes, I'm going to respond to the email they sent me saying I'm just
good. That'd be great.
response.
And Bob, are you okay with drafting this letter that might come from the towns? Because that would be a document that could be so useful that each energy committee could then use to get on the agenda with the select board of their town.
1 minute.
Yeah.
Hank,
I would,
before
I'll help
we
you,
go on-
Bob.
Before
Yeah.
we go on, Hank, you just joined us. Are you on the building committee?
No, I used to.
School?
No, I'm not on the building committee for the school, but I think it's energy efficient building, and
Yeah.
they're meeting tonight. So I think that's all been completed.
We want to go much further.
Well, we know it's energy efficient, and we're talking about feeling
Net
that
zero.
that is not sufficient.
Yeah.
Hank, who are you? Are you with Truro or Orleans?
No, I'm on the Orleans Elementary School Committee. I've been on for years. I used to be on the Orleans Energy Committee. I'm no longer on that.
Nice to
Okay,
meet you.
And we're intimately involved in the new building project with the Nauset Regional School Committee.
Yeah.
Great.
Right.
Kevin, what can you say from Orleans' perspective? This is all new to you, I think.
Yes, it is all new, but I certainly think that I would be in favor of our committee reviewing this letter that would ultimately come from the select board, encouraging the development of the net zero construction. And who is this letter going to be going to? The school, the regional high school
I would assume that the Regional High School Building Committee.
building committee. Yeah.
Yeah, there are two parts, and we're focusing on net zero energy usage, but that's not our goal. Our goal is net zero greenhouse gas emissions. That is, you can have an extremely inefficient energy envelope if you have all of your heating come from renewable energy. Okay, and what I try to get them to say is the heating should be electric heating using ground source heat pumps. Then even if the building is only to LEED silver standards, so it's not as efficient as it could be, the wasted heat is all coming from renewable energy sources and is therefore not contributing to greenhouse gas. So you have to keep the net zeros involved separate. They don't have to be net zero in energy. That would be nice. They have to be net zero in greenhouse gas emissions, which means changing the source of their heat to be a ground source heat pump, because it's a large project, which is powered by electricity. That's renewable. And
Well, the electricity has to be sourced renewably as well. And
yes, yes.
the basic Cape Light compact package that they call renewable is not actually.
Yes, it is actually renewable.
Well, yeah.
So
We can talk, but
that's another conversation. But what they ideally there should be solar panels on the building.
The high school is buying their own electricity, and they're buying it through solar panels and deals with solar vendors.
Okay, that's
Right.
different.
And even though they're getting the subsidies, the SRECs, which means it's not renewable for 10 years, after the SRECs run out, it's 100% renewable. So in the long picture, they're heating it with renewable electricity that they're generating. They're buying the electricity from Wellfleet and from other sources and putting panels on themselves. So they're using renewable electricity. The point is that they have to heat with that renewable electricity, even if it's not net zero energy, it should be net zero carbon. Because that's our goal, to protect the environment, not to, so I don't think I got that point across with this group, that they're looking at the wrong thing. They may have gone as far as they want to in terms of LEED silver as opposed to LEED net zero. After that, it may cost more than it's worth. I'll take their judgment. They need to look at changing the heating source.
Oh, basically changing the design, maybe more than the heating source.
Right.
The source of the source of heat and cool.
Well, but there could be bigger design changes too involved.
Well, you dig a hole and you pump fluid out of the ground. That's, yes.
Can you identify for it? Do you know some vendors that provide ground-based heat pumps?
On this scale, no. I've never done anything as large as a high school.
So, I think whether or not.
But high schools are doing it.
So we could, and if you want to do so, we can. We have a little less than an hour left in this meeting.
Yeah.
We could spend the whole time very valuably talking about the high school.
Right.
But we should just be clear we're making that decision. We have some next steps, I think. Do we agree on what those are?
Yes, I think so. I'll write a letter explaining the difference, and we will start working on the letters from the select board.
And Bob, you'll write a draft, I hope, for the energy committees to submit to their.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Bob, I can help you if
Yeah.
that.
Well, when it comes to the edit part, Michael, but I'd rather engage Brian for the technical stuff, Brian and Mark.
Sure.
Okay,
But yeah, because I can pull this card whenever I want because I'm just a stupid cop and that.
okay.
I encourage you guys to go to them asking for a migration plan.
That's what I did, Jeff.
Well, I think that's the key, but you're going back to them, and I
Yes.
think that's the key piece that you want to, really hammer them.
Right. Okay, David, could you continue?
And-
We
And
could,
yeah, so I'll get in touch with just everyone after I talk with the people that I'm planning to talk with, and that may inform your letter, Bob.
right.
Okay, and I'll revisit. I'll call Cape Light back tomorrow.
Okay, look,
See
we have a hard stop at about 10 minutes to 7, so let's let David get going. Okay,
Okay. I mentioned briefly electric powered transportation. This is a rapidly developing area, as you probably know, but there's still a lot we could do now on education, promotion, financing. I think there are ways to get some preferred pricing and some preferred financing, whether it involved the state or something we do locally, but that's just one of the 5 suggested goals. Decarbonize our heating and cooling. This is a gigantic one because it gets into the guts of everybody's house and everybody's business. But again, and it's not going to happen overnight. This is going to take years and years to do this. But the idea is to get to a point, I don't know when it would be, where we aren't using heating oil or propane on the Outer Cape. And that to begin to move in that direction is going to take, again, a lot of community discussion, the right kind of financing, promotion, education, vendors, seals. It's a whole project all by itself, and it's not one that's going to happen overnight. It's much harder than getting people to put solar panels on the roof of their homes. This is getting into the inside of a house, and I know there are many landmines in this, but that's number 4. Number 5 is to push again through a lot of education and meetings, more renewable energy production and renewable energy purchase. It is the best it can be. And just to summarize, sort of, these are 5 things that, and we could have had a list. To Matt's point, we could have a list of 10 or 20 things, but those are 5. And whether or not we can take on even one of them is a question I'm just laying out there. It certainly couldn't be done by the people just on this Zoom call. It's going to take more. So I won't read through these, but I put in here some success factors and lessons learned from the Outer Cape Energize program that, having been so involved in it, that I thought might be useful going forward. They're just for you to look at different ways of approaching things, how we think about what we're doing. You can read it on your own. And then the who is a really big question. Who should do this? Well, we could have a core team of members of our town energy committees, but we have to decide how much we're going to take on to decide how many people should be involved. Do we get people from other places, Cape Light Compact, the commission, select board members? If we're going to have anything of any scope, regardless whether it's the 5 I listed or something else, I think somebody has to be the overall director or coordinator of what is going to be, no matter how we slice it, a complicated and possibly difficult project. So I think an overall director is important. And then maybe, this is just another idea, maybe working groups. So let's say we have 3 goals, 10 goals, whatever number, and we develop working groups that focus specifically on that one goal, and they drive the activity and the ideas and the movement on that specific goal. An example might be we have a work, we kind of already talked about a working group about the Nauset School project. But this would be the same idea applied to broader goals that we might select.
I think if we want to do something about propane and fuel oil, that would be a good idea, because that problem in itself has a lot of aspects to it. I mean, one of them is, what do you do with the companies who's based on selling propane and fuel oil? What do you do with them?
That's right.
And there are a bunch of people who work for those companies, and you can't expect them to just ignore, this issue. So what kind of approach will it's not, it's not just getting rid of it by replacing the stuff in the houses, which is a problem. So we've got to have another way of thinking about this.
Right. And that's, again, why it would take, it's a complicated topic all by itself, and it would take a really focused, hardworking working group to deal with those sorts of issues, Robert. I agree. I just listed here other possible resources at the end, just places that we might go for, whether it be space to use or financing or information or just people. Some of this is a people power thing. Sometimes you need a lot of people to show up at a meeting to make a difference. But they're just some possible resources. And then sorry. I tried to put down some next steps. We've talked about some of that already. My thought was, whatever we come up with, we should try to get all the towns on the Outer Cape engaged. They may not agree, or they may not want to, but at least try. And then have the right kind of internal discussions, because each energy and similar committee has to figure out what they actually want to do and vote on that. And then get the concurrence and agreement from the town select boards. That's town by town to some degree. And then my thought is, rather than say, this is the plan, say, we want to go out and talk to the community. We want to listen to what people have to say. This is too intrusive in a way in people's lives to just say, okay, everybody, here's this plan. Let's explain it to you, and then you'll agree. We need to do some listening and education and outreach to a whole bunch of stakeholders, in my view, so that if we pick whatever goals, they're provisional goals, because we can do our level best to convince the community to agree with us about whatever our goals are, but for almost anything of any scale, we need to get at least sufficient community support. And that's the feedback on the plan from the stakeholders, basically. And then lastly, and I'll stop right here, to come up with some kind of structure. How are we going to actually do this? What's it going to look like? It's an operating organization, what we're talking about. It doesn't have to be an official nonprofit or anything else necessarily, but it does have to function like I would submit a business. It has to have clear lines of communication and responsibility and deadlines and people who roll up their sleeves and get stuff done. And until we get a structure that we think is work, one of my worries is we're going to have our eyes are going to be bigger than our stomachs. We have to be sure somehow that we can actually implement whatever we come up with. And I don't know the answer to that, but I know that I can easily imagine on the Outer Cape and sort of a working group of, I don't know, 20, 30, 40, 50 people to divide up into working groups to kind of move whatever we pick forward. So those are my thoughts, and we can figure out what to do next.
Yeah, David, I was struck that there was no discussion about economics or impacts on the goals to others, and just individual people and industries on the Cape. And I think that's got to be a part of it. We have to really evaluate all that as well.
Yeah, you're right, Lily. I couldn't agree more. There was maybe it was, I went over it too quickly.
I think I saw you flash it by about jobs.
I was thinking from the beginning that net zero should be always looked at, yeah, all these projects through the lens of economic development and jobs. And I tried to emphasize that in one of those slides. I forget which one it was.
Yeah. Our experience on how to Cape Energize is everything you do is always cost effective. It might have a 5-year payback period, but not much longer than that. But it always makes you money, given an incentive structure that's set up properly.
Right.
But people.
But you have to set it up properly.
Yeah. I have 2 things to add. One is, I mentioned this at the Cape Light Compact Board meeting that we might be doing this again, and Maggie was very willing to support us again, so we can count on the Cape Light Compact providing the technical assistance. And
I'm sorry, Dick, can you repeat that?
The Cape Light Compact is worked with us on the Outer Cape Energize before, and they're willing to support us again in 2 areas. One is energy conservation, and the second is renewable energy by making sure people are all Cape Light Compact customers, which is a new aspect, but nonetheless, they're 100% renewable. And Bob and I can have that discussion, but I understand his points. It's still 100% renewable. The second thing is that Chris Pawicki introduced something to the Cape Cod Commission to change the regional policy plan to make greenhouse gas emissions going to net zero a goal of the plan. And the Commission's been talking about it for a couple of meetings now. The staff's gut reaction was, we don't need to do anything, we're already doing it. They came back twice, much to the disappointment, I think, of most of the Commission. But I think they're coming around. I had a talk with John Eidman and kind of agreed that, yeah, they all agree it's a goal. Maybe it needs to be said a little more explicitly. But the point is, a change to the regional policy plan will start a process of a year of hearings throughout the community on how to reach a net zero goal. So we will be holding these meetings, but the Cape Cod Commission will be holding meetings also on how to reach net zero, assuming they follow up on that, which I think.
Do you think that they will, Dick?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
The question is, do they just do it right now, or do they go through the entire process of getting the community on board by holding meetings on how to accomplish net zero?
Okay.
The latter is probably more to our advantage because it's widespread publicity for the goal of net zero.
Right. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, I have to say, Dick, I've sat in on the hearings and I've been following it because I'm on the assembly representing Wellfleet, as you know, and we voted on the regional policy plan last fall, and the commission, took 2 years to create this regional policy plan, and and the commission staff voted on it, the commission board members voted on it. There was a subcommittee in the commission, and they worked really hard on this. And the commission's staff's plan right from the beginning was that this is a climate-friendly document that is very general, and that the technical bulletins and the action plans build off of the framework of the RPP, or the Regional Policy Plan. And I think that's a really good plan, that it's, that Chris Pawicki's, proposals, the 11 proposals, do not belong in the Regional Policy Plan. They belong in Climate Action Plan, which the Commission has been working on. It has been having hearings. It has been having focus groups. I mean, you and I went to one of those focus groups, and if there is this quote unquote special interest introduced into this general document that covers all areas of importance on Cape Cod, then every other special interest group is going to be in there, and it's going to be a 3-foot high document. And it just got changed. It just got 2 years of hearings, and so I think the staff has done an outstanding job on this, and I see the work that they're doing. They're working very hard, and they've tried to explain it to the commission board members that this is just not the place for these proposals. It belongs in the climate action plan.
Okay.
And,
So first,
so I have a different
okay, Lily, let me stop you. There's no climate action plan. There's talk about writing it, and the climate and the website has a lot of information on the climate action plan, and it's all about adaptation, nothing, zero about mitigation. Let me repeat, zero about mitigation.
They're
And
working
we are
on it.
discussing mitigation, that is greenhouse gas reduction. So the staff gets up there and says we have a climate action plan.
No, they're not saying they
And
have it. They're working on it.
not ever produced an outline or table of contents of what that plan might in the future contain. And they're not, and their meetings are all about adaptation and not about greenhouse gas reduction.
They've been working on that adaptation for
They're
a long
not
time.
working on
But
it.
they
They're
are
working on
working on the
adaptation.
mitigation. You and I went to
It was all about adaptation. It wasn't about greenhouse gas reduction.
It was indeed. There was a lot of discussion about greenhouse gas emissions and net zero in that focus group. There really was, I just totally disagree with you. And I think that you should have another conversation with John Eidman then, if that's what you come away from.
No,
Because they've done a great job.
okay.
All right.
Go out to the website, look at the outline of their climate change initiative, and you will find nothing about greenhouse gas reduction.
Because they're working on
The website is always up to date.
plan.
The website is up to date.
Who is working on it?
The
Cape
the
Cod
Cape
Commission
Cod Commission is.
staff.
Oh, is that right? I
Yes.
spent a lot of time trying to get them to do something about greenhouse gas emissions, and it never went.
Yes,
No,
they're working on
no,
it.
Robert, they are
They
claiming
talked about it
victory.
at the hearing, that they're working on that they're trying to come up with the metrics so that they can have the baseline so that they can set goals. That's what they said.
And we told them that to set the
A
goals.
baseline? A
Pardon?
baseline of what?
Yeah.
Greenhouse gases?
Yes.
That's funny because they've never exhibited any real interest in accomplishing that.
No,
Yes.
Robert, they are interested. They
They
held a
have
meeting
come
with
to
the
the
state.
assembly and they presented it to the assembly, in fact.
Yeah, they held a meeting with the state. They've accomplished nothing because they don't know how to. And that's because it's not really a county level problem that can be solved. They go around claiming victory because we're doing a greenhouse gas inventory. But we know that the outcome of their meeting with the state was we don't know how to do anything. So they held a meeting with the state. That's their one action that they're repeatedly briefing as being as we're making progress. We held a meeting with the
You
state.
shouldn't even be on the commission then, Dick, if you feel that way about the staff. They have worked so hard.
I know they work
They have done so
hard.
many
I'm not saying they
They
don't
have
work
had
hard.
hearings up and down the Cape on mitigation. I really am,
Adaptation, Lily, not mitigation.
no, that's not true.
Vulnerability and resilience, not greenhouse gas reduction.
I'm gonna end here, but that's not
Okay.
true.
All right. So anyway,
You guys have to agree to disagree for now.
We
Matt,
are,
I noticed you wanted to say something earlier.
who?
Matt? I saw Matt with his hand up.
Mike?
It was Michael, I think.
Oh, Michael. Yeah, we can't hear you. He's muted.
Your microphone is, there you go.
Okay,
Okay, I was struggling to
There
unmute
you go.
myself. Yeah, thanks. I wanted to suggest that we come back to the actually what's on the shared screen right now, which is next steps,
mhm.
and that we sort of go over these again and see if we can come to some agreement on them.
Okay.
Yep, sounds good.
So, what would be the very next step?
I guess we should approach Eastham and Provincetown, right?
Did you approach Provincetown already?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
Well, here, I've gone back to the goals. I think for sure the one next step is certainly to try to get Eastham and Provincetown involved. And maybe to come to the next meeting, maybe we set up a series of joint meetings, for example, like this. I think this is great because we get a lot of input from multiple towns.
Why did you go off the next steps chart though?
Because I wanted to go back to these goals and see if anybody's interested in any of these being part of what we work on.
I think we definitely have to further define the goals. And I think everybody should give feedback as to the slides.
Okay.
What
So-
about a proposal? We talked about a number of different groups, each one focusing on some area. Would it be useful to, let's say, have an initial proposal for a set of groups, 10 groups, whatever. So I'm always concerned about it because it seems to me, in my past experience, that the difficult problems no one wants to work on. And I'd like to see, for instance, when I mentioned the propane and fuel oil, because it's been a concern of mine for 2 years. And I've spoken to, to Julian, et cetera, and everybody starts off saying they're going to have a proposal or how to approach the problem. No one has come back with an answer to something simple like figuring out how much propane is burned in the town of Wellfleet. So I would feel good if we acted on the idea of what's an example or starting list of, let's say, committees which have focuses on different parts of this problem.
So one committee should be how we get our data on greenhouse gas inventory, which means what fuels we're burning, right? That committee, that's a metrics committee, right?
For instance, it would be great to enumerate this, and David, I'm sure you've thought about this to some extent.
Well, another committee, I think that if I looked at the state rule, they said you should have various plans. And one plan was working on decarbonizing home heating, which means getting people to use air source heat pumps in their house. That's one group. Another group might be, you can always go back to encouraging people to put solar panels. That's another group.
Well, there could be a group for each of these 5 for sure, and they're very different kinds of work depending on how it gets defined. I mean, Lily, to your point, there's no question that these are just very brief descriptions, and each of these would have to be fleshed out in lots of detail. I didn't feel that it was my role to do that for this meeting, but if we agreed that these categories are of interest to us, then we could set up these committees or subgroups to define more precisely what they might mean and how to go about it, and come back to the larger group. That's one way to do it.
Right.
I'd like to kind of pick up on your point about the need to go to the community and involve them in dialogue, and let that be a part of how we define through that process. We define sort of what our first projects are going to be and what our ultimate goals. I mean, as I see it, there's sort of a choice. Like, how soon do we go to the community is really my question.
Right.
Like, if we do a lot of preparation and try to identify what possible projects are and what what the 5 suggested goals are, and what whether it should be 3 goals or 12 goals, or
Right.
or do we and set up working groups and all that. Do we do all that first, or do we go to the community first and 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 hear from people and find out what people's interests are, and start raising awareness and doing the listening as well that you were talking about?
Well,
Yeah,
Michael,
In my mind, I just want to say that I personally feel at this moment more excited about that, about the idea of jumping into engagement and creating dialogue, creating forums
Right.
that involve as many people and as many stakeholders as possible, and letting that kind of guide the process at least somewhat.
Well, Michael, I could see kind of a mixed model in a way. That is to say, there's got to be some framework around it to say, why are we even asking someone to come to a meeting? So we could have information about climate change, net zero. What does it mean? How does it work? What are the issues? What's happening at the state level? Just sort of broad education we could have. And whether or not we have provisional goals as well as another question, but we ought to have some kind of, I think, presentation about the whole net zero issue. And then we could certainly frame a lot of the meetings as then listening to what people have to say about how I just put in an oil burner, I'm not going to change it, whatever. We need to have people be able to speak.
But David, there's one thing I have to say. We're not going to hold any in-person meetings until maybe January. We
Or
keep
maybe
thinking
later.
of having meetings, but we need to change. If we're going to do anything between now and January, we're going to have to be thinking about a different means of communication.
Right.
What about outdoors, summertime neighborhood meetings? Like with social distance,
Yeah,
like
I mean,
small
they had-
meetings,
they had
but
some-
many of them in each one in each neighborhood.
They had some town meetings already where, like they had one in Orleans where they were just, sitting in the field by the middle school there.
Really? That's great.
Yeah, I mean, I think we take advantage of the fact that it's summertime and we can meet outdoors.
Well, and part of the question is, I'm just still thinking about sequencing a little bit. So part of me thinks that we might want to spend a little more time formulating our thoughts and coming up with our team and all that business, and a little bit of a structure. And in particular, take the time to get at least broad support, not about the details, from the select board. Because I know that elected officials don't like to feel blindsided by somebody calling them up and saying, what are you doing about X or Y? And it feels like it would be a relatively easy thing. I could be delusional to make a little presentation to the select boards, get them to say, okay, we get it, we agree. And we say, all we want you to do is say you support the idea of dealing with these issues, and we would like your blessing so that we can then have that and go out and speak to the community. And maybe we try some Zoom meetings as well. I don't know.
So that argues for doing the preparation first.
Well, some of it anyway.
Then
I
the
just think
publicity.
some of it.
Yeah. So, but we do need to organize more than this. We're not organized enough to go to select boards or start publicity for meetings, because it takes a lot of public relations to get people to come to a meeting,
Right.
whether it's a Zoom meeting or it's an outdoor meeting.
And by the way, on that point, one of the things that was the most frustrating for me about Outer Cape Energize is nobody, certainly not me, was a public relations or marketing expert. And I got to say, if we could find somebody who's really good at public relations and all forms of media, et cetera, that would be a major. There were 3 different people that volunteered to do that were out of Cape Energized, and all 3 of them quit, like right away. So that's just a plea that if people could be thinking about options for that.
Okay, well,
I think it's a good idea to go out there and paint, a not completely articulated picture of all the different things that could be done, and look at it as an opportunity to get other people to join us in those things.
Yep.
I mean, that's how you really move things forward, because people are given something that they can do that's useful. And if you
Right.
if you're just talking to to 40 people and expecting something to emerge, you need to really offer an opportunity to contribute and be involved in that.
which means you have to be in a position
and
to
to do
sign
that-
people up to do stuff at the meeting,
And
right? You
Well,
have,
Well,
yeah.
and that's an argument for having sort of one first project ready to go. That's something that ordinary people could get involved with.
Yeah, maybe it's the high school.
Yeah, or maybe it's getting every household their energy audit, their Cape Light Compact energy assessment.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, I think what I go back to is we need organization and structure and human resources. These are a lot of great ideas, but not to be too stuck on the method. But we've got to figure out how to actually do some of this, and we can have and all this matters. We could have a little select board support initiative or whatever you want to call it. Also reach out to other volunteers, to your point, Robert, and also start to get the word out to the community. We can do all those things, but even to do those 3 things in a provisional way means enough of us have to put our hands up and say, I'll work on that, I'll work on that. And somebody's got to keep it all moving forward, which is some kind of structure and process.
Yeah. And David, I go back to your last point where, we serve at the pleasure of the select board in Wellfleet. It may be structured differently in other towns. And I know the charge of the Orleans Energy Committee is way different than ours. But we do need to go before our select board before we do a big community outreach. As you said, they don't want to feel blindsided, and we don't want to do
Right.
that to them.
Right, and there's no reason to. I think there will be.
But a first step may be that that each one of us go through the presentation and make suggested revisions to it, or
here's what I would.
additions to it, or
Yeah,
something
sure.
like that, and send it. I guess we have to think about open meeting laws too. So.
Well, we kind of need to get the other towns involved at the same time too, the other town committees. So maybe, Dick, could you work on getting Eastham and Provincetown engaged?
sure, I'll be happy to.
And what, excuse me, what I would be happy to do is if everybody sends me any thoughts, revisions to this document, or brand new thoughts, something that's not here, an emphasis that you'd like to see done differently, send me anything you want. And one of the things I could do is try to come up with a new version of this, but a little shorter and a little more focused. That could be the basis for a presentation to each town select board. We could have a presentation that we could get approved by each of the committees, the appropriate committees, and then that committee could get on the agenda, present it to the select board, and then hopefully get that part done in that way.
David, how much does the presentation that you showed us tonight differ from the one that Dick sent out with the meeting invitation a week or so ago?
Very little. The only difference is a few words here and there, but I also, the main thing is I added information about this House of Representatives legislation. This, and that.
All
Yeah,
right, well, could you just resend that to?
Yeah, I'll resend the entire document to everybody.
yeah, and David,
Can I ask
I
that
don't have, we don't have emails from some of the people that joined.
right, I was about to
That would
ask,
be really, really helpful to send that out so we have that information.
could anyone who didn't get the Zoom invitation from me, please send me your email address, dickelkin@gmail.com, and I will add you to the mailing list. So I guess, I don't know if Michael got it. Hank, I don't think you were on it.
So what I'll do, Dick, is I'll just send you this presentation we've gone over today. I'll send it to you, Dick Elkin, and then you can send it out. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
So Dick, this is GB. I just did one other thought that occurred to me is, you know, we talked about at some point setting up these task groups to work on various aspects, and I'm just the thing that I'm concerned about is there may be some task groups that could be substantially impacted by the results of the November elections. And if that is the case, maybe we should take that in consideration and, you know, defer activity in that area until we get past that point, so we know what the terrain is going to look like going forward. In other words, you know, if we have things that are independent of or substantially independent of what happens, then we can feel comfortable moving ahead with them. If we have things that might be substantially impacted by what happens, then you know, maybe we want to take that a little more slowly.
Most of our interaction is with state government rather than federal government. We're not counting on in anything I saw any federal action.
Well, I think GB have a good point in a way. We have plenty to do in the meantime. There may be something different that starts to happen in November, more really January, February, March, but we could factor that in later.
Or the working group can identify what's at risk or what's an opportunity.
So I could, just to be a little specific, I will get this presentation to Dick as soon as this call's over, and could everybody get me their feedback by next week sometime? That'd be okay? And then once I have that, I'll put together a new version that would be reflective of what people say, and hopefully something that might be conducive and appropriate for a presentation to the select boards.
Well, how about when Dick sends out the newer version on that, to just have a response cutoff date for comment.
All right, but I just would say by a week from today. How about that? When we can put that, Dick could put it in the email or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
And who is Brian Boyle? I just see, as a secretary, I have to identify everyone.
Brian's from Truro, and he's chair of the Energy Committee.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so we have that as some next steps, and also the Nauset High School steps we talked about earlier.
Right.
And last thing I want to say is I really encourage all of us to be thinking seriously about who else we can get involved, whether it's in our own town or some other town or some skill set, because we're going to need to really pull together a substantial group of people ultimately.
Okay.
So should I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, and this needs to be a roll call vote, or raise your hands and we'll see.
And
David, Dick, Robert, Kevin, you.
I have no vote.
Carol, GB, and Jeff doesn't vote. Okay. That you don't need a roll call, Kevin, but we have to follow the open meeting law because we have a quorum.
Dick, did you second that?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Passion, and we'll get working on this, and we'll get some friends to work on it also.
Sounds good.
All righty. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.